Not that I can think of. One incident, I remember a little boy coming to the library, and I was checking out books for him, and he said to me, "Miss Beck, we haven't had anything." His father, by the way, had passed the bar. He had graduated, and he had passed the state bar. But the little boy said, "We haven't had anything to eat in our house for a week but turnips." And that is how bad it was during the Depression. And there were a lot of people that planted turnips, and they'd let other people come and dig them up. And another very interesting thing that happened in Fair Edition, which is in the southeast east part of town, and our northeast. There was some lady down there, and I don't know who she was, but there was some lady that had a cow, and she milked the cow 4 times a day so that she could furnish milk to the babies around in the neighborhood. There isn't any way to describe how bad that was. But in lots of ways, it was a nice experience because people became very warm and giving.
The sense of interdependence.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What were you doing on December 7th, 1941?
I was in the car. We were in a car. We were between Altus and Hobart, Oklahoma, right by a lake that's there, and I don't know the name of the lake, and we had the radio on. We had been down to a town, and not Altus, it's another little town down there, and bought a sewing machine, or a washing machine. I had never had a washing machine, and I had decided to quit work, and we had it strapped, to the back of our little Studebaker. We were going around this lake, and I heard the announcement on the radio, and of course we just kept it on. Then we went on to Hobart, where my parents lived, and I ran in and told them they had not known it. But that, I remember it very, very well. That lake might be Lugert, but I'm not real sure about that. But I know exactly what I was doing. And of course, that's all there was on the radio.
Did you do any work for the war effort?
No, not really. I baked cookies and stuff for the canteen, but see, I was pregnant. And then I had the tiny baby, and I didn't do anything except stay home and take care of her. Mm-hmm. And then Earl left. Yeah, I gave him. He left in September after Kathy was born in December. She was not a year old yet when he left. And he went.
What year?
43. Because she was born in December 42. It was 43. But we couldn't find a house. He knew that he was going, and we couldn't find a house to rent here, so we moved to Yukon and rented a house and lived in Yukon during the war.
Now, were you working?
No. I had a baby, dear. And that's 40 years ago, right now. Well, actually 39. But not very many people worked with small children. And I wouldn't have even considered it, but, and I didn't go back to work until my youngest one was 12 years old.
It was in June of 61.
Mm-hmm. No, not June. January. Mm-hmm. January the 1st. Well, the 2nd, because we weren't open on the 1st.
In your experiences in the library, have you heard any stories about the history of El Reno or?
Thousands of them. And literally thousands of them. There are 2 of those boxes down there that are just filled with pictures, with slides that I have had made, and I have, some of those are European ones, but when I was in Europe, but these, I have one that's totally Fort Reno and Darlington pictures of Fort Reno, Darlington, and then one on the history of El Reno.
Right off, could you tell me some of the most significant stories you remember? Just one or two of them.
Not that way. There's oh no, not really. I remember once, but I don't remember really enough about the story. But a man came in one day and was telling me about when we became a state, and how his parents, his father had a saloon. They got, see, that day, that was the end of the saloons. And of course there were many saloons in El Reno, and there's interesting, there a lot of gambling too on Rock Island, and there's a store, and right across the alley there's another store on Bickford. And the gamblers, some of them old ones told me about this early, they had and you can even see the doors where they were in the brick. They had a door on this side of the alley and a door on there, and they built a bridge across. So if you wanted to, you were gambling in this one, you didn't have to go downstairs. You just walked across the bridge. But you could see those places on the building. But there was lots of gambling. You see, a railroad town has a bad reputation, had very bad reputation then. And there were lots of saloons. One time I had an old Catholic priest, I was talking to an old Catholic priest from Okarche, and he said, "You live in El Reno?" He was very old, and I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you should have been there when I came to town." He said there was a saloon in every block and a murder every day. It had a very rough reputation. But there aren't any other stories that I can think of that just offhand, I don't know, any of them. I'm sure there are stories, but I don't remember any.
Do you have stories that relate to the photographs you have down here?
No, but I have a pattern that I do with it. And I tell about what they're all about. But that would be difficult. The only way we could do that would be to get the pictures out, and then I could do it that way and point out points of interest. But just for this purpose, I don't think my stories would be too good. I really don't.
How many photographs do you have of like Darlington and Fort Reno and El Reno?
El Reno I have about 200, I think, and Darlington and Fort Reno I'm not sure. Now there are a lot more photographs at the library. There are hundreds of photographs at the library that I collected. Worlds and worlds and worlds of them. And most of my pictures, I had to do them myself. I mean, I had to pay for them myself. That's why when I left, they left with me. But there are a lot of them that I don't know whether you'd find any other place, because people gave them to me because I'd been here a long time and because they trusted me. And they're up there. Did you go in the archives room?
No.
See, that's my room. It has my name on the door. They should have taken you. You should have been in there. Next time you come, pick me up and we'll go down and I'll take you through it. Because according to the University of Oklahoma and according to OSU, the historians in both places, it's the best local history collection in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm sure it is. I don't know. I think I estimated probably about 25,000 pictures, but I haven't counted them. And there are stacks and stacks and stacks of pictures on everything. And really, there is so much down there, Joe, that you should see that we have. And because I don't know of another collection quite like it. So many people I know. Do you remember who Bob Dotson was? But he did these very good things for WKY. One on the blacks, and then one on the Shines and Rappos. He did the Shine and Rappos down there, or I helped him with it. And the first day he was there, he was looking through the thing where a lot of the pictures are. And he turned around to me and he said, "This is the best collection I have ever seen." And he said, "It's the best organized of any collection I've ever seen." Then I have a friend who studied in England for a long time, and when he came up there, he said the same thing. And I have to laugh about that because I told both of them, I said, well, thank you much for the compliment, but would you like to know how I organized it? Both of them said yes. I said, anytime anybody gave me something with a space to file things in, I filed them. And that's it. There was no order really to it at all. But there are, it's a very valuable, and we built that room on in 1963, and it's fireproof. Has no windows in it, and the humidity and is supposedly is supposed to be in the heating and cooling system. It's supposed to be very good on that. And Merwoods gave a lot of his stuff to the library. There's one collection down there that he gave that has all of the men from Canadian County, or most of them. It would be impossible to say all of the ones that were in the First World War, and then another collection of the Second World War. And he has made some notes on the cards. We also have a lot of his pictures that he had in his newspaper work. He gave that to the library. He also gave all of the tapes that he had, his newspapers on tape, you know. And then I bought some every time I could get $7.50. And at that time, the very old lady was there at the newspaper department at the
Louise Cook.
Yes, and she was so helpful, and she'd get anything for me. Then when she left, I tried to get things, and I didn't even get any decent treatment, so I gave up on it. And because they're really wonderful to have. And the library has an excellent reader now. It has excellent. Mary Ashbrook died and left most of her money to the city of Reno, and it's under a board of 3 women, and they can award this money, and they've given the library a lot of money, and for the very special things. And that's the best copying machine in that library that I've ever seen any place.
Mm-hmm.
And now the city furnished it, though, but the other things. But I wish when you have time, you take time sometime and come get me. Or I'll meet you down there, because you really ought to know about the room. Mm-hmm. Your whole field, you need to know about it. And we have some very, I was given by an Indian 5 letter books, and they are down there. You have some of them over there, and anytime you think you're going to get mine, you're wrong. Because they're not going there. But somebody's copying them. Are you doing any copying over there?
Yes.
Well, I think you have permission to copy ours, but under very strict things. They have to be hand carried over and hand carried back. They cannot be put in the mail one at a time. The ones I have are, I don't know. They're some of them are in the 80s, but some of them are in the 1870s. They are wonderful, and this Indian had them. This is why Jack Haley thinks I'm so good, is because the Indian knew who I was, and he came in and just gave them to me. And when we were getting ready to open the room, and they go way back. They're some of the earliest ones, and of course we have a Cheyenne the newspaper. Cheyenne, whatever it was, transcript, I believe. And we have a tape of it down there too, and reader and the whole thing. And but the letter books, 2 people have read them all the way through. Jenny Allen and Dr. Rush that she worked with. He isn't out there anymore. But they've been used a number of times for dissertations and this kind of thing. Of course, they have to be used in that room. They cannot be taken out of that room, and it is fireproof. That was what I wanted more than anything else, and we got that. That and my office. Both of them were fireproof and are fireproof. And I can't. But Jack thinks he said, had it not been for me, those letter books would have been lost forever because they'd been stored under the Indian's bed for years and years and years. And when he brought them to me, he wanted, his uncle had them. He said, and I don't know the names now. I just can't remember them. But Jack, the Western thing the other day,
Jack Haley.
Said, see, that's the Western deal that I go to. Not the posse, but the other one.
Western History Collection.
Yes.
Western History Association.
Yes. I got the nicest thing from them yesterday with a picture and everything in it. It's real nice. But that was what he was telling him. If it hadn't been for me, those would have been lost forever. And I don't know, but I know they're just like yours over there because I've looked at yours a number of times. And very valuable material. I don't remember the rest of the things that we have a lot of interesting things too that probably may not be too significant, but a bunch of the stuff from the old city hall, as they were emptying the city hall, when that city manager brought everything to me, and there was a lot of just papers and stuff and sidewalks and everything, and I went all through those and put them by the year, and they're filed by the year. So this is helpful.
Yeah. Do you allow copies of photographs to be made out of that?
Yes, we don't care. But I don't like them taken away out of town.
Yeah.
Now, if you can bring a photographer over here, that's what I've always... The only way we've ever allowed them was when I was down there. If they'd call and tell me, or come in and pick out a picture, I would make an appointment with the photographer here. And I would go down and stay with the picture and take it back. Do you see? I wouldn't even leave it in the studio overnight. Now, I have a lot of Ben Clarks from your library that I had done one time. A bunch of them, about 20 different pictures. I think that the continuation of this thing might better be done in the library. With me explaining to you and showing you what was there. Now, I don't know whether you think that's important or not, but that might be a better way than just, off of the top of my head trying to think of interesting
question.
things.
What got you to set up this archive room?
I just wanted to do it. When I went back to work, I knew that there were some things there, and I began hunting. And none of the librarians had ever thrown anything away, thank God. And I went and found the stuff up. I found a bunch of the big Smithsonian books up there, and that were upstairs. See, when the library was built, the whole upstairs was an auditorium, and the rooms to the north, or the west, had the stage and the dressing rooms and this kind of thing. And found a lot of things, and found a lot of the Chronicles of Oklahoma. We lack only one issue of one book, and I've looked and looked and looked for it and have not been able to find it. It's volume 6, but I don't remember the number of the missing one. However, we do have some duplicates too. There are a lot of duplicates there.
Have you checked with the Historical Society to see if they have that?
Oh, honey, I've checked with them for years, and everybody, they can't find it. And the only thing they could suggest was that I'd have it copied, which I would have to pay for myself, and I'm not going to do that, But then there was a move for a while. Somebody said they might start reissuing the early ones, and I wish they would. Of course, I also wish that they'd go to work on another index. I have the other one here. I have a lot of my chronicles here. But somebody told me one time when I was over inquiring about it that they were going to do it in one big volume, and I'm opposed to that. It makes it too hard to handle. Besides that, with one big volume, you only one person can use it. And with 2 volumes, and then also, like in my case, I have 1 volume. I don't want to buy that one over again into a big one, do you see?
Right.
And I think it would be foolish to do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I've talked to 2 or 3 people. I've fussed about that for a good many years. And another thing that I've tried to get is the City Beginnings in Oklahoma Territory. That's such a good book. I've tried to get OU Press to reissue it in paperback because it's an excellent book. Mm-hmm. And the man who died that was head of the organization, he was a friend of my father's. I can't remember. He died 10 years ago, I guess. And he was trying to get, OU Press to reissue it because they reissue other things that are not really. That is a wonderful book for Oklahoma history class.
Mm-hmm.
But,
another question.
Yes.
Were you involved in the WPA around El Reno in any way?
No, not except that I knew the people that were in it.
What kind of projects did they work on around here?
Everything. Now, they did a lot of building out of Fort Reno. My husband was a supervisor, well, actually ran the whole thing, out there. And they did a lot of building out of Fort Reno. And of course, if he was still alive, he could tell you exactly where they were, mm-hmm. how long it took to make them, and the whole thing. But the WPA was there, and they did some street work. And I don't remember that they did much for the city. But I know that a crew of men worked out there for almost all during the war, under WPA.
What about CCC?
Well, a few boys from here went to the CCC, but it wasn't close. I don't know where they went. It was some other place. Mm-hmm. I knew 1 or 2 of them that went. And we had a good little youth thing. Oh, they had a building, a house that they made an office. It was for employing the kids on the NRA, but what did that NRA stand for?
National Relief Act.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I'm not either. Well, we had the NRA here, and they employed mostly girls at doing things.
What kind of work did the girls do?
Well, anything they knew how to do, Of course, if they were typists, why, that was wonderful. But there weren't a lot. But I was not directly involved in any of it. Mm-hmm. Because nobody that I belonged to me worked on the WPA or any of it, and so it just I wasn't deeply involved in it.
Mm-hmm. What's your fondest memory of early day El Reno when you first moved here?
I don't know. I hated the place, so I don't have any real. That way, I don't know. I really don't know. All of my fondest memories are connected with the library. Mm-hmm. Almost entirely.
When was it built, the building?
The library, the original one, was started at the Carnegie Foundation. Gave them 11,000, or maybe 12,000. I believe it was 12,000, and they got the money, or they started getting it in 1903. It was dedicated June the 15th.
Now, was that the original building?
What?
Is that the original building?
Yes, the original building. Now, we've had 2 additions. I added the archives room in my office, and then this, with the Ashbrook money, they built on 2 big rooms that are all right, and put in 2 restrooms that are real nice. But in the planning of it, they didn't ask anybody that ever worked in a library to help them plan it. And I think the girls are working it out all right, but, you plan libraries so people can't walk away with the books. You also have to have back doors that are open in case of fire. You have a problem. If you can't have somebody in the reference room all the time, and nobody can do that. Or almost nobody could in a small town.
Well,
I really can't think of what we need to talk about any more than this.
maybe we could have a session down at the library in the archives room.
That, I think, is the best deal.
Yeah.
I think we could, because we could talk about the pictures. One of the pictures down there is mine. It's the oldest picture of Fort Reno that anybody's seen, and it was found in an antique shop in Illinois by a friend of mine. She bought it and brought it back and gave it to me. And it's 1885.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
December 16th, 1982.
Right.
This is Joe Todd. Interview with Edna May Armold, A-R-M-O-L-D. Mrs. Armold, when were you born?
What did you say? When was I born?
Yes,
a
ma'am.
long time ago. September the 8th, 1909.
And where were you born?
In Osakis, Minnesota. Would you like me to spell Osakis for you?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
O-S-A-K-I-S.
Mm-hmm. How long did you live in Minnesota?
I lived in Minnesota until I was 9 years old.
Okay. Do you have any childhood memories of Osakis?
Oh, heavens, yes. Worlds of them. My father worked in a grocery store.
What was his name?
And his name was Percy W. Beck, B-E-C-K.
And where was he born?
He was born in Rich Hill, Missouri. And his father came to Oklahoma in the Cherokee Strip opening.
And who was your mother?
My mother's name was Louise Buheim. That's B-U-C-H-H-E-I-M.
And where was she from?
And she was from Osakis.
Okay. You say your grandfather made the Cherokee Strip?
Cherokee Strip, yes.
Okay. Did you know your grandfather?
Yes, I did.
Did he tell you about the run?
I've heard about the run all my life. I heard about it long before I moved to Oklahoma where they lived. Because I think that was my very first interest in Oklahoma history was because of that. Because my father told me, my father was 7, I think, when the run happened.
What was your grandfather's name?
My grandfather's name was Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-A Beck.
Okay. Could you tell me what he told you about the run?
Well, I can tell you more about what my father told me about the run than my grandfather.
Okay.
But I know that my grandfather came down from Missouri to take part in the run, and he rode an old horse that I still remember as a child, that they still had the horse on the farm. And he got a farm close to Hunter, Oklahoma. And the thing that was bad about it was he was used to Missouri, and in Missouri, high ground was better than low ground. That is not true in Oklahoma. So his first claim was one sort of on a riverbed, which would have been a good one. But somebody came along and wanted to trade him this other claim, and he traded, and that was always a mistake. They were very interested, they were very religious people, and extremely interested in religion and education. So, but, and my father came down, my grandmother came down she had 3 children, my father was the oldest, and they landed in a town up by Enid now, Kremlin. I came on the train to Kremlin, and the first night they were there was a very bad sandstorm, a windstorm, and my father remembered crying and wanting to go back to Grandma in Missouri. And my grandmother wrapped them up in a feather bed that she had while the storm was going on. And I've heard that story many, many times.
What year was that?
Well, it was right after the run, and I'm never sure whether the run was 92 or 93. Are you?
93.
Well, that's when it would have been. Probably, the run was in September, it probably was like in October. But then my grandfather came to get them and took them, would have had to have been with a horse and wagon, of course, from Kremlin to where his farm was. And they started building a building, and my father got very ill with pneumonia, and they put him in the building and built the building around him while he was sick.
What did they live in while the building was being built?
They lived in a dugout. because one of the things that always fascinated me as a child was that my grandmother told me this. My grandmother lived a long time after my grandfather, so I knew her better. But she was washing dishes one night in the dugout, and a rattlesnake dropped into her dishwater. That fascinated me. It still does. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, they had a very hard time the first winter, and I know that they were very careful about. They were very careful with the salt, so that they wouldn't run out of salt. And my grandfather decided to leave my grandmother there with the children and go back to Missouri. And he had worked in the mines before, and go back and go to work and earn some money. And one of the stories that always interested me is that he was very hungry, and he stopped at somebody's house and asked for something to eat, and they turned him down, and so he never would do that again. And he went on and got to Missouri. I don't know how long he was there, but
when did they move to Minnesota?
They didn't ever live in Minnesota. My father did, but that's, see, well, after they got settled, they were very interested in schools, as I've told you. And so when they got through the 8th grade, why, my grandparents insisted that they go to school, continue their school, and so the 3 of them, or 4, 4, went to Tonkawa, where there was the school, and they, what they call, batched, and they went to school in Tonkawa for that year. Then the next year, that summer, my father sold stereopticon views. He rode a bicycle, and he ended up in Minnesota and stopped at my grandparents' house and asked for a drink of water and met my mother. And this was sometime in the summer, and they were married in October of 1908.
Mm-hmm. What kind of town is Osakis like?
It's a very small town on the edge of one of the gorgeous lakes. It's right on the edge of Lake Osakis. And the main business in town was a big general store, and that's where my father worked.
What was the name of the store?
The name of the store was Herberger's. Do you want me to spell
Yeah.
it? Herberger. It's kind of interesting on how my father quit working for that man. I think it might be well to tell it now. My father was the next to the highest one in the store. He was next to Mr. Herberger, and he also was a bookkeeper for them. But in Minnesota at that time, now this would have been when I was 5, so 5 and whatever that year.
In 1914.
1914. They in Minnesota, of course, they didn't raise peaches, and peaches came in by the carload on the trains. And so Mr. Herberger instructed my father to put bad peaches in the bottom and good peaches on the top, and they argued about that enough until my father quit. And by that time, he had decided that he wanted to be a minister anyway. But before, well, he must have quit sometime about in early December, because he decided that he wanted to come back to Oklahoma and talk it over with his mother. They were extremely close, and so we came to Oklahoma at that Christmas time. And another thing that I think will interest people that are interested in early history at all is that, of course, in Minnesota, all of the dirt is black, and in Oklahoma it was red. And that was very interesting to us. And I had one brother that never could forget that they had red dirt in Oklahoma. And we had a Christmas there with the whole family, and then went, of course, on the train back Osakis, and his first church. Well, he had three churches. Was 13 miles from the Canadian border. The name of the town was Lancaster, where we lived. But on Sunday mornings, he could get a train, and he would get up like 4 o'clock in the morning and take a train to Orleans, which was even closer to the Canadian border than we were. And he would preach in the morning at a Presbyterian church. And then he got another train, came back in the afternoon. You see, they were much more fortunate than we are now. You could go on trains and get almost any place. And then he would preach in our church, which is a Methodist Episcopal church in Lancaster at night. Then on Wednesday night, he would drive as much of the time as he could to another little town named Bronson, and it was a Baptist church, so he preached to them on Wednesday night. And we lived there until September, and then moved back down further into Minnesota. And we moved to Ada, Minnesota at that time.
Now, when did you move to Oklahoma?
Well, we came to Oklahoma. My mother died in 1918, and my mother and sister died the same day with the flu. And it was right after the war.
This is the big flu epidemic.
Yes, the big one in 1918.
You were still in Osakis at that time?
No, we were in a little town named Barnesville. That's also in Minnesota.
What was the flu epidemic like in Minnesota?
It was horrible. They would go into houses and find entire families dead. But my mother got sick, my father got sick first. Well, he decided he had to go back to school. So he would go on the train to a town named Moorhead and was going back to school. And he always thought, he ran to catch the train and got overheated, and he thought that that's the way he got the flu. Of course, it could have been anyway. So he got sick on Sunday morning, and by Sunday night my mother was sick, and by Monday morning my sister and one brother and I, we were all sick. But fortunately, my mother had a friend who was a nurse, and she came to take care of us. But my mother died on the 15th of December, early in the morning, and my sister, who was 2, died at 2:30 in the afternoon. But you couldn't go any place. I know one of the things that I remember so well is my grandmother insisted that I wear a little bag of, I think they called it asphodity.
Asphodity.
It smelled terrible, to protect me, because I was in school. And as soon as my grandmother left, my father told me to throw the bag away, and I was glad to do that. But then in the January following that, my grandfather had a stroke, and we came back. We came down to Oklahoma, and I went for a short time, about 4 months, I guess, to a country school, which was a very different experience than I had had before.
And that was in Oklahoma?
Yes, that was close to Hunter.
Now, what did you move down here in 1918?
Well, no, this was 1919. See, it was January of 1919. We moved down in the summer. We moved, I came back. I stayed with an aunt a while and came back and I had 2 brothers, and we stayed there on the farm until it was time for school to start. Then, because of schooling, my grandmother, in the meantime, my grandfather died, and in August, and she bought a house in Winfield, Kansas, because there was a college there and a very good situation. So we all moved to Winfield, and my grandmother had all of us to take care of, and also took in a boarder and a roomer besides that. And
how large was her house?
Oh, it was a big house. It must have had 5 or 6, probably 5 bedrooms upstairs.
And this is the house that they built?
No, they bought.
They bought
My
it.
grandmother bought it
Okay.
in Winfield, Kansas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Hunter. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
No, you see, we're in Kansas now, and then my father married in 1920, and we lived there until wait a minute, I think I can remember that date. I remember the year. I remember well, I was 15 years old, and we moved to southern Louisiana. I think we're getting a little involved here in a great many places, but that's the way.
I would like to ask, do you have any memories of the train trip to Oklahoma when you moved in 1919?
Oh, I have memories of when we came down when I was 6.
Oh.
See, on the train. Yes, we got on the train, and then we on the train. We were on the train until we got to Kansas City. Then we had to change trains at Kansas City, and then we got on another train, and ended up at Enid. And one of my great uncles came to pick us up, but that was the time that we went. The first time I came. Now the second time I also remember when we came down here, because we were, all of us were sort of weak from having had the flu so bad, but the situation was about the same. We stayed on the train, and we were, I think it took us always 2 nights and 3 days or something like that to come down.
What's your best memory of your train trip?
My best one? Well, they aren't very good. None of the memories are. I know one of the worst things that's happened to me. I had gotten a red patent leather purse for Christmas, and I lost it. That I remember well.
Another question I'd like to ask, you had a nurse that came in and nursed you while you
Stayed.
had the flu.
You stayed in.
What kind of medicines did she give you?
I have no idea. Absolutely have no idea. I don't know. I don't even remember ever taking any medicine, and I'm sure that we did, because I remember the night my mother died very well. I remember, and they got me up and the boys up, and we stood by her bed when she died, my father. And then that was 4:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon. We stood by my sister's bed and watched her die. We had good medical help all through the thing. But
how many people in Barnesville died of the flu?
I have no idea. Absolutely no idea.
That flu was pretty much worldwide, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It started in Spain. And
what caused that flu? What started it?
Well, I don't know what started it, but I know how it got here. The men coming home from overseas. That's what. But that, you can write books about that flu. This town, you had some interesting things at that time.
What happened in Reno?
Well, a group of women, and I've heard this story, although I didn't live here then. But they took like the big rooms that had places where people went to dances and stuff, and they put cots and beds and everything in there, and the Red Cross would go from place to place to take care of the people, and in and out of houses. I don't know about the death rate here either, but it was tremendous every place.
When did you move to El Reno?
Well, we moved to El Reno in October of 1930.
Okay, now you moved to Kansas and Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
When did you move?
Texas.
In Texas.
We lived in Fort Worth.
And when did you move back to Oklahoma? In 30?
Yes, that date.
Okay.
Actually, my brother and I came in on Halloween. My folks had come a little earlier. But my brother and I got in on October the 30th, 1930.
Mm-hmm. So you lived in Fort Worth in the 20s?
No. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to Fort Worth in 27.
Were you a flapper?
I sure was, honey.
What is a flapper?
Well, you wore your skirts too short, and I don't know that you could describe it any other way. I did not ever dance because my father was a minister and he objected to it.
Where does the word flapper come from? Where did that originate?
I don't know. I haven't any idea. We could stop and I can go get the dictionary and look it up.
So in the 1920s, you were a flapper.
I sure was. And that was, preachers' kids weren't supposed to be. I had a very liberal father. He let us all, I hate to use an expression like this, but do our own thing, the three of us that were grown. Well, I was 18 and I had a 16-year-old brother and a 14-year-old brother at that time.
What did you do for recreation in the 20s while you were a flapper? What did you do?
Oh, I don't know. We did a lot of stuff. Of course, I went to TCU, to school. I was in school at TCU. And there were a lot of things at the college. I lived at home, however. But I was in school there for 2 years and 2 summers. And there were a lot of college things. But I was thinking about that the other day. Of course, being a Christian college, they couldn't dance. So when they had the things that would have been like dances, why, you simply took the boy's arm that asked you and you walked around the campus for a little while, and then you came back and you changed partners and walked around the campus with somebody else because they didn't allow dancing. I've got to tell you one thing too, that at that time, because it's sort of representative of the time, we had a dean of women at the school, and she used to, of course, lecture to us quite often. And I remember one day when we rode streetcars, and I remember one time when she had us in and she was talking to us about behavior. She said, "Now, girls, anytime a man gets up to give you his seat on a streetcar, don't sit down till all the body heat is out of the thing." I think that's hilarious.
What was her name?
I don't know. Beckham, I think, but I'm not real sure. It was Beck something, and since my name was Beck, I can remember that. I think it was Beckham.
And when did you graduate from TCU?
I didn't. I quit. That was the last school that I had. Mm-hmm. Because 1930 and 31, you didn't go to school much. Especially not if you were handed a job that you liked real well.
Did you have a job in Reno when you moved here?
Well, no, and I didn't in the fall, and then I enrolled in school in Stillwater. And my father called me one day and said, "There's a vacancy at the library. They're looking for a children's librarian. I'll come and get you on Saturday." And so he came to get me, and I applied to the board members. There were 6 of them. And I'm being very frank on this tape, but I think that's good. And I know, I can tell you exactly why I got the job. There were 164 applications. And I got the job because first, I was a Democrat. And second, I was born into a family that made me a lady. I was born into that situation. And the third one was that my father belonged to the Kiwanis Club, and so did most of the people on the board. That's the only reason I got the job. Mm-hmm. I went to work there February the 26th in 1931.
And that's the library here in El Reno. Mm-hmm. Why did your father move to El Reno from Fort Worth?
Well, because he was assigned. See, the church in Fort Worth just fell apart because of money. There was not enough money. And so he was assigned here. because that's the way Methodist ministers are. They don't choose their places. Well, they do, but not totally. They usually have a choice, but the bishop appoints them to churches, and he was here for 6 years.
So he was appointed to the church in Reno.
To the First Methodist Episcopal Church.
Is that church still here?
It is and it isn't. It combined with the Southern Church, and it's now United Methodist, I think.
So you started working for the library in 1931.
In 1931, and I stayed there until February of 1942 on that particular job as a children's librarian. And it was a very, very busy place because the children, it's of course located downtown, and the children didn't have much to do. So I organized 5 different groups that met. We had a Pirates Club and we had a library club. We had a whole bunch of stuff. And I started I had story hours with those. And then I had, I think, the first preschool story hour in the state of Oklahoma. Beginning, I had 3-year-olds on up to school age. And but the children would come and stay all day. Of course, I encouraged them to do that. And we really had a lot of fun. And during that time, we would make things every summer. And I would use my own money to buy the supplies because there wasn't any other way to get it. And occasionally, even now, I'll meet somebody that's pretty fat and bald-headed and say, remember, you helped me make a basket when I was in the 4th grade. And that's fun. And I always pretend that I know them, and most of the time I don't. But then I deliberately quit to have a baby. I decided I wanted to have a baby. And so I quit, and I stayed but the minute I stopped working at the library, I was appointed to the library board, and I stayed there until I went back to work in January of 1961.
You went back to work in 61?
In 61, and worked until 75.
Can you tell me what the Depression was like in El Reno?
It was horrible. I sure can tell you. We had, my mother averaged about 90 people a month, well, she kept track of them, that she fed at her back door. And my father was head of the Red Cross, and he would go out all day, hours of the day and night, and see about people that were it was a horrible situation, and there was, of course, in the early part, no help at all. And then when they had the work programs, when Roosevelt started the
WPA?
Well, all of them. You know, there was a bunch of them.
Yeah, CCC, WPA.
Yes, and NRA, which was the Young People's Program. I can't even remember all of them. And during that time, too, the women that they had working, most of them didn't know how to do anything. And I had 24 women that I had to keep busy because it was a warm building. And most of them were not capable of doing much of anything.
This is the church building?
No, library. Library. Mm-hmm. And but they'd come up there, and there were 12 would be there part of the time, and the other 12 the other time. So that year I had to figure out something, and I bought a lot of tissue paper and cut out little snowflake things and showed them how to do it, and gave them a needle and a thread. And they'd make a snowflake, and they'd string it on the string, and we had them snowflakes hanging all over upstairs at the library. Some of them could do real well. I had one that was very, very helpful. She had been educated in a reform school, And she was a good secretary, and she could do a lot of things like that. She had one problem, and I had to get rid of her, is that she brought her bottle to work and would have a little too much to drink. But there were a lot of experiences. There are so many in the period of the Depression. One that I remember about now was about a young boy. He was about 14, I think. He managed to work a little bit and earn a little money, and he went down and bought dried beans. And he knew if the people that came around to see about them saw the beans, they would object to, they wouldn't like it. And so he hid the beans under a plank, a board in the kitchen. And somebody did come and find out. You see, we didn't have any trained people to help with any kind of maid work or really nothing. And one time, too, I went with a woman who worked on the program, checking up on things, on what was happening to the people. And we went to visit a family just about 2 blocks from here, living in a tent. And the woman was needing help and was desperately needing. And there was a bed over there, but we didn't pay attention to it. And pretty soon, a man raised up out of the bed asking us for something. He wasn't trying to do anything for himself, but he was there. And there was a lot of that.
You say your mother fed about 90 people?
90 people a month.
Now, where'd she get the food?
What?
Where did she get the food?
We bought it ourselves, dear. That was the only way. My father told me about that time, or when we moved to this town, that he said to me one time, now if anybody comes to our door and asks for help, and if it's possible for you to give it to them, you must do it, because if anyone was turned away from my door without being helped, I could never stand in a pulpit and preach a sermon again. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were broke. Everybody was. But
part of it in 1902. So I sat down with the newspaper for 1902 to try to find out more actually about the building of the sanitarium. It's a very time-consuming thing, and I have a ball that I still may find more about it, but I was able to find only one thing really, and it said that there was much building being done in El Reno. This was in August of 1902, and that the sanitarium was coming along real well, and they hoped it would be finished soon. And I did not find where it was finished. But you understand, in the old newspapers, sometimes it's not a complete file. And you'll be going along, and it will say, this many issues missing. Now, I have one other one that I want to go through, another roll of tape, and we may find a whole account of it. Or at least its dedication or some of those things. We also may have from Lillian Adderhold. She's going through the Adderhold home over there, and when she finds anything interesting, she brings it to me and gives it to me. Now, Mrs. Adderhold was great on keeping programs and things. So if they have that, if they find a program of the dedication of sanitarium, we'll have it later. So this will be a continuing thing, and anything anybody finds. And this is what I like about this program, was Stanley being interested enough to bring that. And I think the no dues, no obligations is a good thing. Come if you want to, and don't if you don't want to. But in 1902 they were building it, and as nearly as I could tell, it was Dr. Hackett and Dr. Shatee I knew it was Dr. Hatchett. So this morning, yes, all right, I didn't know it till this morning. I called Lucille Blair, who was a Chattee, and I said, now in looking through it, as nearly as I can tell, they were in business together, Dr. Hatchett and Dr. Chattee. And I said, is this a relative of yours? And she said, yes, it's my father's brother. And they had lived here, they were in business together, Hatchett and Chattee, and they had their office. And so they built the sanitarium together, but she said they didn't live here very long. But do any of you know where the McDonald House is? Well, it's 1 block straight east of here on the corner. Yes, it used. They took the front porch. That's that was the Dr. Chattee's home. They built this for their own home. But for some reason, after 3 or 4 years, they left here. Now, there's a great that had come here from Indiana, and there's a possibility that Mrs. Chattee didn't like the climate. This is the reason that most people left, particularly professional people, in the early time, because the women couldn't stand the wind or the dust, and that may be the reason.
And malaria.
And malaria.
Part of town that was in trouble with malaria.
And yes, and Mrs. Chattee mentioned this morning, Ms. Blair, that so many, in the summer, they had so many sick people from what they call summer complaints.
Yeah.
And there were always many deaths. Now, this possibly may have been, some of it could have been typhoid. Do you see that this could have?
Well, the summer complaint was primarily among the little kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Many of them died, especially in their second year.
Mm-hmm. Lucille said that her sister was so ill when she was 18 months old, which was her second summer, that the doctor said, if you want to save her life, you'll have to go to Colorado for the summer. Mm-hmm. Well, now, with the Chattee family, the doctor would say that. With some of the rest of the families, probably, he wouldn't have. You know what I mean? There was a great difference, far greater difference between the people who had a lot of money, and a lot more than there is now. Yes. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to read a couple of these things that were written by 2 nurses, because it's such a good history in both cases. Now, this first one was written by Anna Picklum, and then I'll go on into this other one that was written by J. Roberta Wood. Now, in the books here, we have a list of all the people who've graduated. We have everything. There's so much material that we could spend like 8 programs just on the sanitarium. But instead of doing that, I'm going to go over it briefly, and then we can come back to it if you want to. But I think this is very interesting because Miss Picklum, how many of you know Miss Picklum? She is so good, and I didn't want to upset her by calling her and asking her to please come. If she had come in where I could have sat down with her and talked, and she comes in a lot, I'd tried it. I tried the Idaho girls, and they wouldn't come. We can do this again on a sanitarium sometime and probably get Annabelle Smith, maybe, or some others. Yes, she would. The El Reno Training School for Nurses was founded in 1902 by Dr. John A. Hatchett. 3 nurses entered the first class. 2 had had some training elsewhere. Ida Ferguson, how many of you knew Miss Ida? I do too. Started and completed her training here. She was the first graduate nurse in the state of Oklahoma. Ida Ferguson was among the group who organized the Oklahoma State Nurses Association. She also served on the Oklahoma State Board of Nurse Examiners. Miss Roselle Dunning was the first superintendent of nurses of the El Reno School and also treasurer of the Oklahoma NA, which is the Oklahoma State Nurses Association, in various capacities from district president to state president. Several served in the First World War. Ida Ferguson was presented to the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 1937 for being the first graduate nurse in Oklahoma, for her services in state nursing, and for services in World War I. Nita Marsh, another graduate, was the first chairman of the private duty section of the American Nurses Association and a champion for private duty until her death. The early day training was strenuous. 12 hours on duty, no maids. Lectures were given by doctors, except those on practical nursing and dietetics were taught by the superintendents of the nurses. All lectures by doctors were given in the evening. This hospital served the entire western half of Oklahoma. Over 100 doctors brought patients to the El Reno Hospital. However, there were patients who were still afraid of hospitals and refused to enter one. These patients had their operations in their homes. Every nurse who graduated from the El Reno School of Nursing knew how to set up an operating room in a home. We had 2 bags. Now, I know Dr. Adderhold invented these bags for, so we could use them. And she gives a good description. I haven't seen one. We're still hoping that someplace in the Adderhold house, in the attic or someplace, we might find one of these bags. We had 2 bags which were prepared in the hospital surgical supply. They were made especially for the purpose of home operations. One was a large suitcase with an addition that stretched out like an accordion. This contained enough gowns and supplies for 4 major operations. The second was a traveling bag with an extra bottom. In its lower part went a copper-covered box. This box contained the sterile instruments folded in sterile towels. The top of the bag contained ether, an ether cone, alcohol, gauze bandage, iodine, adhesive, and so forth. A senior and a junior nurse accompanied the surgeon on these trips to any part of the state. Sometimes these trips were made by train, and sometimes by automobile, and sometimes by a combination of both. On one trip made in an open Ford touring car, there were curtains, but they flapped. One of the nurses, now some of you don't even remember side curtains. I did. One of the nurses took cold as a result, and so high-topped overshoes were ordered in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. The nurses had to wear them, also a hood or a fascinator, in spite of objections. We could have a room ready for surgery in 30 minutes. Our patients recovered nicely. Usually, a graduate nurse went along to nurse the patient after surgery. If none had been requested, some relative would say, "Doc, can't you leave one of the nurses?" The poor little junior nurse was left behind until a graduate was sent to relieve her, which was sometimes several days. The student nurses were also hired out in their senior year, but this was stopped in 1917. Maternity care was different in the El Reno Hospital than in most hospitals. It was what today is called rooming in.
I had that for $5 a day. You pay $100 a day now for that.
Oh, yes. A separate building was used, a very attractive residence. The separate rooms were beautifully decorated and had dainty white curtains. Each room contained a bed for the patient, one for the nurse, and a baby bed. And there is a picture in one of the books of one room.
That's right.
The furnishings were such as to make a mother feel at home. A senior nurse was special to one patient and baby the entire time of the patient's stay in the hospital. It had this effect. Our first patients were women of wealthy families, and others came because what was good enough for Mrs. Rich is good enough for me. Patients were delivered in a well-equipped delivery room. Linens and blankets were of the best in this building. Contagious diseases were taken care of in a separate building. These were in units containing patient's room, cubicle for nurse's bed, bathroom, and kitchenette. A nurse went into quarantine with the patient. Supplies and food were sent from the main hospital. These separate buildings were fine for preventing cross-infection. A slogan Dr. Hatchett gave the nurses time and again was, and I love this, remember, the patient is homesick and sick away from home. That is so nice, so nicely said. I had not heard it before, so I read it, yes. At first, the nurses had headquarters in the hospital, but only for a few years. Later, there were 3 residences, one for each year of training. Nurses had to keep their own rooms, and all rooms had to be left in order with the beds made when they went to breakfast at 6:40 a.m. Nurses in training were given compensation of $5 per month the first year, $7.50 the second year, and $10 the last year. There was a piano and a Victrola in the senior college. The student nurses were given parties on special occasions. The 12 oldest nurses in training had expenses paid for one day at the Oklahoma State Fair every year. El Reno nurses entertained the Oklahoma State Nurses Association in 1913. The County Medical Society entertained the guests with a banquet at the Southern Hotel. The nurses also entertained the League of Nursing Education in 1924 and were hosts to District 1 several times. The graduates of this school of nursing have nursed from New York to California and in the U.S. Army in Europe. Only a few are still active in the nursing profession. The school was closed in 1930 at the request of the alumna. The alumna was organized in February of 1922. It was the first nurses alumna in the state and was active for 10 years. The organization disbanded December the 28th, 1947, having voted to give the residue of their entire funds to the Oklahoma Research Foundation.
Was that Anna Pickles?
That's Anna Pickles. Now, I'm going to read the other one. But I think it is so good. You know, you could do a program. Anybody could take this and do a good program because it's so clear and so well done.
Why did it close?
I'm going to ask Anna next time I talk to her.
I would the name of Dr. Hatchett.
Dr. Hatchett, yes. I would suspect, Callie, that the reason they closed was that, you see, by 1930, there were excellent larger schools. There was the University of Oklahoma School of Nursing. But see, when this one started, there weren't any. Only one in the state. And there were, and then St. Anthony's, you know, and Mercy, all of the big hospitals had, I suspect, superior to what we could have up here.
But it's probably getting a little bit more expensive, too.
Yes, well, 1930, there was no money at all. You know, a lot of people.
Nurses were all hungry.
Yes.
I had an operation in 1933. I know what year I got married. 1930. They didn't have anything to eat but macaroni and tomato sauce.
Yes, it was and I suspect that, well, I think by that time they weren't paying them anything in training, as they don't now either.
You know that in 1933 I went into the cemetery and I had a room upstairs, just off the operating room. I was the only patient on that whole floor. Now, you know they can't make it like that.
No, well, that was, of course, our problem there. That, well, people, you know what they did.
They just stayed sick.
They stayed sick or they died because they didn't have any money.
One day when I was, the nurse was giving me my bath, she looked out the window and she said, Lord, cover her boy. She said there's a little boy that they're falling in some kind of fire and badly cut up. And she said they brought him into the hospital and Dr. Adams stitched him up. And she said they kept him there for a few days. So they took him home, moved out the country, and every day the mother would bring him in, and the nurses would bathe him, and then they'd dress his wounds, Get this, pure white back. She said, it's the strangest thing, I never saw this done. She said, Dr. Adder will never put a thing on those wounds, but pure white vaseline and soap and water. And she said, I never saw anything heal like that.
That like it does.
The three buildings that it refers to there for the
two of them are. Now, as we get through, somebody can. Do you know where? Do you know where the old Adderhold house is? Where Lillian lives?
Yeah, I know.
All right, straight across this way, there was one of the nursing homes, and straight back of it was the other one.
Well, right across the street from the Adderhold was a maternity hospital where I had my two boys.
Yeah, well, we have all those pictures, and I'm going to let everybody, discuss all this. I thought we'd go through this other thing first, because this is real interesting.
Dude used to see Marie Shacklet up in school when he was going to high school. Shacklets were living in the house then.
They owned it then,
and he said, I was born in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to, it's something rings a bell. I must ask Marjorie when she was in Chickasha.
State examination for nurses, which was held in the state capitol in Oklahoma City. When it was learned that the nurses' training school of the Reno Sanitarium, which had been graduating nurses for 20 years, had never had a candidate for graduation fail in the state board test. Knowledge of this fact was gained through learning that the student, Miss Elsie Owens, who made the high score this year with an average of 95 and 11%, it says, was the second successive student from this school who had made the highest grade in the state test. The interest the records of these two graduates aroused caused an examination of the school's achievements during its existence, with the results as set forth above. This is an unusual record for a school of whatever type, but it's not so surprising when the training school is considered in detail. This was the first training school for nurses to be opened in what was Oklahoma Territory, and it was the first school of its kind in the state to adopt a regular course of training and to graduate a class of trained nurses. The Reno Sanitarium, also the oldest hospital in Oklahoma, has maintained a training school from the first. The main building, which at first served as a 30-bed hospital and training school, was completed and opened in 1902. And then I'm going to skip a little bit because some of the it talks about the different cottages, and then three of the buildings together with the hospital building go to make up one of El Reno's most attractive blocks and are used for a nurses' home. Each class, senior, intermediate, and junior, has its own cottage presided over by some woman in authority. Miss Barnes, the superintendent, as hostess for the seniors. Miss White, assistant superintendent, hostess for the intermediates. And Miss Vanderwerk, office secretary, hostess for the juniors. The senior home has a large and handsomely appointed drawing room where the larger class parties for all the classes and general receptions are held. There are 21 student nurses at present, and they are joyously awaiting the advent of 7 others in September. This number of young ladies who are carefully selected from the list of applicants having the desired qualifications, good moral character, good health, and a high school education or its equivalent, make a most interesting and attractive colony. There are enough within their walls, together with the number of graduate nurses, which must be available to a hospital of this size, to have the amenities of social life, side of life, cultivated within their circle. They are not, however, restricted to their own numbers, but have the same amount of social gaiety allowed to any students in a well-regulated young ladies' seminary. The first full year's course equals that of the ordinary 4 years university course. The 3 full years course, this interested me much. The 3 full years course equals that of the ordinary 4 years university course of 9 months each. You see, it would. And the degree which is conferred at the completion of the course, you may be sure is deserved. We learn to do by doing is exemplified in this course of instruction. A visit to the classroom, a large, well-lighted interior room, is a revelation as well as a pleasure, and a feeling that one has gained an insight to a higher plane is carried away after listening to a lecture by Miss Grace Barnes, the superintendent, who is also one of the instructors. Aside from the instruction in professional duties, these ladies are constantly reminded, by example as by precept, that proficiency along professional lines can not make up for the lack of personality, kindness, tact, courtesy, and gentleness. In fact, the manifold womanly attributes are emphasized. She has this all underlined. And the lectures are heeded. There is a feeling that prevails throughout the hospital of personal interest and kindly consideration. These young ladies seem to be among the first groups to realize that the new order is at hand, that once more is grace in women commendable, and that low voice in women is much to be desired. The home life of the student nurses is carefully looked after, everything possible being done to make them happy and content. One student assured us that it was necessary to literally drive the graduates away. No matter where they go after graduating, this training school is always thought of as being home. And many who have gone to far lands keep in touch with the school. You know, I would take that with a sort of a grain of salt, wouldn't you?
I don't, because Anna Picklum still hears from...
Oh, I know.
That she just contacted me.
But I suspect there was some of it that was a little unpleasant. Oh, yeah. She's so good about it. One of the most valuable lessons learned in this training school for nurses is that of loyalty. This is doubtless due in a measure to their keeping ever before the minds of the students the life and the pledge of Florence Nightingale, and she gives this out but I'm not going to read all of it. You know it's caring for the sick. When one is wont to repeat each day a pledge so fraught with high ideals and loyalty to one's calling, it becomes a part of that person. To this ideal is added the actual carrying out of a part of the club woman's creed. And Lord, let us not forget to be kind. That's in the BNPW code. I don't know how many other clubs it is in. The attention to details, the little things that mean so much to the sick, is given in this hospital to the extent of making it as well known for that attention as for the skill of its staff of physicians and surgeons. The woman's touch enters into this matter of detail. And I love this part because it's the first time it's ever been said that I know of, and I think it is so true. Mrs. Adderhold, the wife of the surgeon and the secretary of the corporation owning and operating the hospital, insists upon maintaining the home atmosphere. Mrs. Adderhold is also one of El Reno's leading club women and has this enviable opportunity to put into practice that creed which has more than any other influence of the age brought about the sisterly feeling between the Colonel's lady and Judy O'Grady. Mm-hmm. Now, going back on this, if you will know that even to this day, nurses, although they work very hard, and really it's rough to become a nurse, are professionally not equal to other professions of the same educational requirements, and this is wrong. But some way this grew up way back, do you see? And I think it's because they actually physically took care of people, but that this made them, and you find it even in hospitals, they will, I know that doctors will recognize physical therapists and the other kind of therapists as almost their equal. They still don't in nursing. And this is wrong, you know.
Yeah, I think it takes a special person to be a nurse.
Oh, yes.
It certainly isn't the same.
No.
They have to have something from their heart.
I think so, too.
Mrs. Adderhold used to visit the patients in the hospital personally.
I know, and she was a lovely lady. El Reno has an organization which shows how the idea of service has taken hold upon her good people. Now, this was a snooty organization, in case any of you remember it. I know from hearing about it. This is the Women's Hospital Association of El Reno, organized in 1908, and has for its object the hospital care of the destitute sick. This association is purely non-sectarian, Any woman may become a member upon payment of the yearly dues of $1. Men could also be a member if they paid their dues of $1. I read that some other place. The El Reno Sanitarium has a room set apart for the association's use, and the services of its staff and of physicians is at the disposal of this association. The personal attention of this club woman, aided by the kindred spirit, show that what can happen and has been done by the women of a town or a city to help in the care of the sick.
Does it give the name of the women?
No, I can. I'll have them when we finish this. I will read them in the different years. This hospital has patients, many of whom are strangers in a strange land. Why should not the clubs have a detailed corps of visitors to look after these, especially during the convalescent period? It is lamentably true that this duty is left to the nurses. It's not unusual for the nurses here in this hospital to pool funds, even the students who are usually low up on the allowance, and to whom a few dollars spent upon a charity means the doing without some coveted luxury. To buy flowers for some lonely, neglected patient who looks wistfully at the profusion of blossoms brought to some hospital, some fellow sufferer rich in the attention of his friends. This hospital has a young lady employed in its office who's bought and paid for services that of compiling hospital records. I have some of the records that she compiled. Now, these records, unless you're doing medical research, I cannot allow you to see. Now, if you have serious reasons for needing, for instance, if the university, and this may happen, in fact, in not too long, where they want to find out why people were admitted, I own some of those records, but nobody will see them except for medical records. I did get tickled at one place where they put down everybody's profession. And your names are in them. Some of your names are in it, I'm sure, because it covers periods when they would be. But one woman, and she isn't in the room now, she's still alive, and she just didn't work at anything. She was just a housewife, but it puts down her profession down here. Lady of leisure. Now here, a story is told of Dr. Armold, the surgeon of the hospital, that is characteristic. One evening, several years ago, the doctor returned to the hospital after regular visiting hours and found an Indian woman crying on the veranda. On making inquiries, it was found that the woman had a sick child, a mere baby, in the hospital, and as the regular visiting hours were over, the nurse attending the child, and it wasn't an El Reno Sanitarium nurse, had told the mother to leave. She had left, the baby which was crying for her, and she, who understood so little of the ways of the white man's sick house, could not understand why she was left outside. Dr. Armold took her back to the child, and when the nurse remarked the breaking of rules, she was informed that in that particular hospital, when rules and humanity came into conflict, the rules gave way. This hospital does the usual amount of charity work and so forth. This is about the rest of it. She talks. This hospital does the usual amount of charity work and so forth. This is about the rest of it. She talks a little bit about Church Nightingale, which is not particularly appropriate. I mean, it's fine, except that we have other things to talk about. But I think this gives an awfully good picture of what we had in here for a very long time, and how little is done, how little is ever said about it. Because you see now, if you say to your children, if your children have been born in the last 10 years, you're in a sanitarium, they'll say, huh? You know, where was it?
That's why we're stressing that at the museum. We have a medical room where a lot of this material is shown and being kept, so the children can see it.
Can see it, yes.
That's another one of the blessings of Canadian counties are living.
Yes. Now we have I had the list of the ladies you wanted to know in the, it was a little more than the Pink Ladies, I think. Well, I know it was. It's something like it, though. I suppose it would be sort of in the same vein. But it was a status thing, too, if you got invited to be in it. You know. Now, the officers. Here's the officers of the present year, and I'm not sure what year this is. This is undated. This is the Hospital Association of the Women. Mrs. W.T. Malone was president. Mrs. L.S. Geary was vice president. Mrs. M.D. Libby was secretary. Mrs. P.F. Harrod was treasurer. Mrs. J.O. Wheeler was chairman of the membership committee. Mrs. Carl Humphrey, chairman of the hospital committee. Mrs. John Funk, chairman of the visiting committee. Now there's another one in here. I have another list. Here's another one, and this is 1914-15. Mrs. V.D. Tinklepaw was president. Mrs. Silas Petty was vice president. Mrs. M.D. Libby was secretary. Mrs. James C. Riley was treasurer. Mrs. H.C. Bradford was chairman of the membership committee, and Mrs. Charles L. Engel was chairman of the hospital committee, and Mrs. Earl Beebe was chairman of the visiting committee. And all of these things, now I think it is 5 minutes to 1, so if you want to look at the pictures or ask me any questions or whatever you want to do now. Mr. Redding.
I remember the old maternity house in the west corner there was one family. They called it the pet house.
Yes. Now.
That's where my daughter was born.
Here it, now. Yes, it was. Here's a picture of it. One time it was where the contagious diseases were cared for. Another time, in one of these other years, it is listed as the maternity. So they changed it. Now here's the junior's home, and I'm not sure about this house. I think this is the house next door to the sanitarium all of it's been sold. But this is
That's where I was and I had the console bath. They took me over to that place.
And then this is the senior's home, and I'm not sure what one that is.
They were using that.